One of the most important things that you have to take into account when you're trying to grow a giant tomato is what's the frame going to be to support this monster. We learned a long time ago that a traditional tomato frame does not cut the mustard. We use a 10 gauge concrete reinforcing wire that you can buy at a concrete supply warehouse. So I'm going to take this flat panel and I'm going to make a roll out of it. And when you pull these together, this wire twists very easily. It's a lot easier to work with. You can do it just with your fingers. You don't even need a pair of pliers. All right, once you have them wired up, I take my bolt cutters and I clip these off. Now that we've got this assembled, I think it's important to make this point. You may not have to go to all this trouble. If you stop at your local nursery or garden center, they may already have tomato frames to support a giant. These things really need to be at least 8 feet tall to do what we're trying to do. And if they're not, then you're forced to make these. But I think it's also important to understand that we have grown tomatoes that were approaching 20 feet tall using this technique. Many people get confused about what size of tomato they should plant. A small, what I would consider to be a 4-inch tomato plant will get you where you want to go for a giant tomato just as fast as buying a large, already pre-grown variety. It's important to pick the right variety if you're trying to grow a giant monster. There are two kind of families of tomato plants, one that we call determinate and one that we call indeterminate variety. The indeterminate varieties are the ones that we're going to want for the growing of the giant tomato. Here's a tip from my great-grandmother. A tomato plant should actually be planted in a trench, not in a planting hole. And because tomatoes are actually related to potatoes, they have the ability to root all the way along the stem. So we're going to take advantage of the fact that the soil is a little bit cold and the sun isn't very intense, and we're going to allow this tomato to develop roots all the way along the stem. In order to do that, we need to take our tomato plant and we need to pinch off all of these side branches, leaving just the stem to root. So you just take your fingernail and your thumb and you just pinch them off. When you pinch them off, you're actually crushing that plant material, and I think it kind of heals it a little bit. And so I don't question Grandma. She said pinch them, so I pinch them. In this case, we're not going to listen to Grandma because these branches are thick enough, the plant is big enough that if I try to pinch these off, I run the risk of tearing the entire stem. So on these big ones, I am going to use a pair of sharp pruners just to snip the bigger ones off. So now that you see what I'm left with, do you really want to pay $16 or $20 for a plant that this developed so that you can pinch it all the way off so that it ends up looking like this? Once we've picked the tomato variety that we're going to plant, the real question is, what do giant tomatoes eat? Well, I have a secret for you. There's a million formulas on the web, and people love to experiment with different ingredients. We certainly have done that for over 40 years in this process. So you can go through all of those things, and you can get a formula off the web and buy a whole bunch of expensive ingredients, or you can just do what I do, which is use Tomato Secret. So I've picked a location to grow this giant tomato in a planter box that seems too small to do what I'm trying to do, but I think it's important to understand that it doesn't take an acre of ground to do what we're trying to do. This is a 4x4 planter box in a backyard. What is critical, however, is you need all day hot sun. The hotter the better. And you will find the leaves of those tomato plants are solar panels, and it doesn't really matter what else we do. If they don't have access to that all-day sun, they're not going to be able to get to be the giants. We need to create a good foundation for this giant. So I usually, when I'm preparing the bed, assuming that I've got some good soil, I take a shovel and I dig down a reasonable amount, good 24 inches, and make sure that that soil is loose and nice down there. And then I begin by putting a couple of scoops of Tomato Secret, and then I cover that up with dirt. Think of that as layers of treasure that we're giving that tomato, but we're kind of creating a layered foundation for this giant. So what I've done is I've taken that great big tomato with the snipped off side branches, and I've laid it on its side. I have to be sure that I'm staying inside the area where the tomato frame is going to be, because I don't want to crush that root system. But I'm laying the tomato in, and I'm going to gently kind of support it up at an angle. Now, when you plant a tomato in a trench like this, there's a couple of things that we're going to gain. We talked about how the stem is going to root all the way along, creating a root system that's 1.5 feet long. But the other thing is, closer to the surface that you get, the warmer the soil is going to be. So tomatoes do not like their feet cold. And if you dig down deep and bury this tomato really deep in the ground, it's going to stay cold longer. It's really important that we protect this tomato right at the very beginning of the season. A lot of people have used a wax hot cap, is what we call this. Place this around the plant, you cover dirt around. It allows some sun to come through, but mostly prevents it from frost. The one that I use, widely distributed, is called a wall of water. I've positioned the wall of water around the tomato plant, and I like to take a couple of stakes and place them in kind of in a triangle around the actual tomato plant. And the neat part about the wall of water is that as you add the water to it, it will kind of lay on itself and form a teepee. But I kind of want the stakes to keep it from closing completely. I want it to be warm, but in the event that we get a hot day while I'm at work, I don't want it to burn my tomato plant. So the process now, once I've got it in position, I'm going to add some water. I'm actually going to give the tomato a good drink. We're not so much watering the tomato as we are getting the air pockets out from around the roots. So you need to be patient with this process as you're adding the water, because many times you have to give it a good soak and then you have to come back and give it another good soak. You can see I've got this most of the way prepared. You kind of go around like you're tightening lug nuts on a car. You do this side and then you do a tube on this side, and as you can see, it's a series of like 20 tubes individually, and you fill each one of those tubes with water. See that they're full of water, and then it naturally will want to lay over on itself, and this water acts like a radiator, so to speak. If the sun warms it up, it still is like a greenhouse, but the warm water keeps it warm at night. Now, as it begins to get warmer outside during the day, I prop this open like this so that the hot air can expand, and you can do that with stakes like this by just placing them out closer to the edge and kind of hold it open a little bit, still provide that greenhouse, but allow the hot air to get out when the temperatures are up above 75. From this stage forward, it's a matter of providing a little bit of care and daily love. You need to pay attention to this wall of water configuration. When the temperatures get above 70 consistently, I'd take it down. Process is, when you come out in the evening, take the branches of the tomato and just tuck them in to the cage. Don't let them grow outside. Just always be taking them in. You have to be very gentle so you don't break them off, but just ease them in and tuck them in maybe to the next level up. But you want to keep it contained inside of this frame. And I still do pinch off the blossoms through the month, probably until Memorial Day. I don't allow a lot of blooms to set unless you're in a northern climate again and your season is just very, very short. But we want this plant to develop roots and really develop some structure so that when it starts to put tomatoes on, it can put them on in a hurry. I love growing giant tomatoes. This is a hobby for me. If you've spent the time to watch the video, you're probably into it as much as I am. So if you have further questions, email me the link below, and stay tuned. We're going to follow it month by month and show you the progress as we grow a giant. Thanks for watching.